Hello everyone, welcome to Quack Talk.
Hello.
And today's topic, I wanted Amber to watch a video and have her tell me what she thinks and her opinions and stuff.
Well, you know I got lots of those.
So we're gonna watch this. This is from a doctor's point of view, and I think she might appreciate it. So
Okay, I'm gonna try and remain neutral.
Okay, it's gonna be, I don't know how long this is.
A half hour? Can we skip it?
We can summarize.
My name's Dr. Paul Mason. I'm a sports and exercise medicine physician. So she was following the conventional advice. She was slavishly following that advice. She was exercising, she was eating low fat, but the trouble is it was not working. At the time she saw me, she was 30 kilograms overweight and gaining. So when I'm faced with this scenario as a doctor, I have to ask myself, who is responsible? Who is to blame? So the patient's following the medical advice that they've been given. So is it the patient or is it the doctor or the medical professional who gave the advice? So I would argue the blame should actually lie with the doctor or the health professional, because the implication of the advice is that if you fail to lose weight, you're lazy and you're greedy. You're just not trying hard enough. But this very premise overlooks the key essence to understanding weight loss, and that's hormones. The conventional calories in, calories out hypothesis ignores the effect of hormones. A very strong science. So we've got a lady here, she's 35 years old, and she's got a problem with a hormone called cortisol, and she's just been gaining weight. And this is what happens when her hormone problem was treated. Mm-hmm. She didn't get given advice to exercise more. Mm-hmm. She didn't get told to eat less. We fix the hormone problem and the weight problem goes away. This boy here, 3 years old, he weighs 42 kilograms, and he's got a problem with a hormone called leptin. 7 years old, he now weighs 10 kilograms lighter and a very healthy weight. See what happens when you fix the hormone problem? Now, the most common hormone in the population that causes obesity is not one of those. It's called insulin. And this lady has a problem with insulin, but she's got a unique problem. She's got a tumour in her pancreas that secretes insulin and pumps it into her circulation. In this picture, she's 107 kilograms and she's only 152 centimetres tall. So she had an operation to remove the tumour, which lowered the insulin levels in her body. Now, these photos were taken 50 days apart. Her weight dropped to 89 kilograms. She lost 18 kilograms. And if we have a look at a graph of her weight loss, you can see that in a 10-day period, she lost 14 kilograms. So clearly there's a problem here with insulin. It makes you fat. Now, this patient also had a problem with insulin. This was one of my patients. You can see her here, 46 years old and a size 20. This is what happened when we fixed her insulin problem. She lost 40 kilograms, and here she's about a size 8. The big difference is she didn't have surgery to fix her insulin problem. We changed her diet. So you're probably asking, how on God's green earth can a diet lead to such dramatic changes in your insulin level that you'll lose that much weight? So let's have a look. This is a graph here, and the height of the lines there represents how much insulin your body's releasing, and each of those individual lines represents one of the 3 main sources of energy in our diet: carbohydrates, protein, or fat. So let's have a look at carbohydrate. Let's see what happens when you eat carbohydrate to your insulin levels. This is called the area under the curve. You get a massive and prolonged release of insulin for over 2 hours. Let's have a look when you have the same amount of energy contained within protein. Much less. And the surprising thing for many people, fat is even less. So think about that for a moment. High levels of insulin are associated with obesity, and carbohydrates are the most potent stimulus we have for our bodies to release insulin. So in order for us to lose weight, we need to control our insulin level, Ergo, we need to control our carbohydrate intake. Now, we can broadly classify diets into one of two groups. On the left here, we have what's called low carbohydrate diets, and on the right, we have low fat diets, which tend to be high in carbohydrate because the energy has to come from somewhere. So let's have a look, an unbiased look at the evidence, comparing these two types of diets in terms of weight loss. Between 2003 and 2018, there were 62 published randomised controlled trials comparing low carbohydrate diets less than 130 grams a day to low fat diets in terms of weight loss. 31 of these studies had statistically significant findings. What that means is that the results were not likely due to chance. You could probably trust them. So what I've done here is I've graphed these 31 studies that had statistically significant findings, no cherry picking here at all, and I've compared the average weight loss on the both diets. The low carbohydrate diet is depicted in blue and the low fat diet is depicted in red. And you'll note that in every single one of these studies that we've got here, the low carbohydrate diet led to more weight loss than a low fat diet. So the question is, which horse would you back? Now, let's change pace a little bit and have a look at fat and see exactly how insulin makes fat tissue grow. Because if we understand this, we can understand the cause of obesity. By the time you're 2 years old, you've got every fat cell that you're ever likely to have. So if you gain weight after the age of 2, it's because your fat cells have gotten bigger, not because they've multiplied. So if we can work out what makes an individual fat cell bigger, then we can determine what makes
It's also why you want breastfeed instead of formula feed.
What I'd like to demonstrate here is that you can see how the circulation,
when
these
you
blood vessels are
breastfeed your
intimately
baby,
related to
they
each
lay
and
down
every fat
less
cell.
fat cells.
Now we understand that hormone is released into the circulation, and because of this relationship with the blood vessels, it can be delivered to each and every fat cell in our body. And these blood vessels also contain fat called triglycerides. You can see here in these squiggly line depictions down there. So what happens to gain weight is that these triglycerides get transported into the fat cell and the fat cell gets bigger. The problem is this triglyceride molecule is very big. It's composed of 4 different parts. You've got this glycerol backbone, and then you've got 3 separate fatty acids. And as a whole, this molecule cannot enter into a fat cell. It has to be snipped up first. And that's where insulin comes in. So what you can see in the left-hand side, we see the triglyceride molecule, and then it's being converted to glycerol and fatty acids. It's being snipped up. And the LPL stands for lipoprotein lipase. This is an enzyme that is stimulated to act by insulin. And then once the fatty acids have been released, they're able to cross and store fat. Without insulin to activate lipoprotein lipase, you can't store fat. And if we have a look on the top there, you can see glucose can also enter fat cells. And it does this through a little doorway or a transporter called the GLUT4 transporter. And again, insulin is what activates this transporter. Once the glucose is inside the fat cell, it gets converted to glycerol. Then the glycerol will then combine with the fatty acids, and then you'll have a complete triglyceride molecule. This is the storage form of fat. Now, to add insult to injury, if you want to actually burn that fat, it has to be snipped up again to leave the fat cell because, as you know, it can't cross the fat cell membrane. And to be snipped up, it has to be activated by, or cleaved by an enzyme called hormone-sensitive lipase. Insulin turns this enzyme off. So you end up with a triple whammy. You have lipoprotein lipase and the GLUT4 transporter being activated, that's stuffing fat into the cell. And then you have hormone-sensitive lipase being deactivated so that you can't burn the fat. So insulin, biochemically, is the cause of weight gain. So for a final proof that insulin causes weight gain, let's have a look at what happens to people who habitually inject themselves with insulin in the same site over a long period of time. It leads to a condition we call lipohypertrophy. Hypertrophy meaning get bigger. Now, these two on the left and on the top right, these two gentlemen injected insulin habitually into these sites in their lower abdomen over a long period of time. The person on the bottom right, their preferred injection site was on the front of their thighs. About 20 to 30% of patients with type 1 diabetes will actually end up with this condition because they inject insulin high enough doses for long enough. So whatever happened to my perfect patient, you know, the one who was slavishly following the low-fat exercise advice before she saw me, was 30 kilograms overweight. Well, we had a discussion. She cut the carbs out of her diet and she increased the fat. And by doing that, she fixed her insulin problem. And then this happened. At last count, 3 years later, she's maintained a loss of 36 kilograms and she lost 28 centimetres off her waist. And these are her actual photos. So let's have a look at what is it about carbohydrates that can lead to this increase in insulin that causes obesity. So begin to understand, we have to have a look at what carbohydrates are. On the top here, we have a molecule of glucose. And across the middle there, we have a depiction of what we call a complex carbohydrate. You know the kind of carbohydrates you get in brown rice and whole grain bread, the stuff that you're told is good for you? It's made of glucose, a sugar. Carbohydrates are made of sugar. And when you eat them and digest them, they end up entering the bloodstream to increase your blood glucose level. When you saw Rod and he decided to have some rice, the glucose that made that rice up entered his bloodstream. And in response to this increase in blood sugar, the pancreas, this organ tucked up in our abdomen here, releases something called insulin. And then the job of this insulin is to remove the sugar from our circulation. It puts it preferentially into our muscle tissue and our liver tissue. And then if there's any left over, that gets stuffed into the fat. The problem is that if you have high insulin levels for long enough, that creates a condition called insulin resistance. So we know that when you eat carbs, you get this massive spike of insulin. And if you do that habitually 6 times a day, as many of you have probably been recommended to do, your body becomes insensitive to the high level of insulin. It's like when you walk into a room with a bad smell. At first it's overpowering, and after a few minutes, you don't notice it anymore. It's the same with insulin, except it only happens mainly at the muscle and the liver tissue. So they stop taking in the sugar, your body compensates by releasing more insulin, and then the body's able to stuff that extra sugar into your fat tissue. So this actually explains why a lot of people come in and they say, you know what, when I was 20, I sat on the couch eating potato chips, no exercise, and I was skinny. And as I've gotten older, I've just gradually stacked on the kilograms. And this is despite becoming health conscious. I now go to the gym 3 days a week. I now eat salads. So the reason that they're gradually gaining weight is because over the years, and this happens over 10, 15, or even more years, they're becoming insulin resistant. And we can actually test for this. So in my clinic with my patients, we do a test where patients will drink 75 grams of glucose, and then we measure their glucose levels and their insulin levels over the course of a 2-hour period. And we can actually assess their level of insulin resistance based on the results. So let's have a look. So in the red here, this represents insulin level, and the blue line represents blood glucose level. So this is somebody who's metabolically healthy. We give them the load of glucose, and 2 hours later, we're having a look. They say the blood sugar is not elevated beyond what it should be, and the blood insulin is not elevated beyond what it should be. Perfectly healthy. Then, in the first stage of insulin resistance or metabolic ill health, you'll note the insulin level starts to creep up. But it's still doing a good enough job of keeping the sugar out of the bloodstream, so the blood sugar is not yet elevated. If you had a blood test, a standard oral glucose tolerance test done at this stage, your doctor would tell you, you're perfectly healthy. Don't worry, go home, you're fine. And yet, you've got the first signs of insulin resistance. You're probably already gaining weight at this stage. As it progresses and starts to creep up a little bit, the insulin goes even higher. And this stage is where your doctor would say, oh, you're pre-diabetic, have you thought about doing a little bit of exercise? Still not too worried about the whole process. And then over time, this blood sugar starts to damage the cells in the pancreas that release insulin. So even though you're becoming insulin resistant and you need more insulin, your body produces less. And then when your insulin levels start to fall, you have a precipitous increase in your blood sugar levels. And that's when diabetes is diagnosed. So let's have a look at a couple of examples. So this patient here, low blood sugar, low insulin level, perfectly healthy. I like this patient. This patient here, they're probably putting on a bit of weight. You can see the blood sugars quite low at 2 hours, 5.6, but you can see the insulin has now risen to 83. Okay, we're starting to see insulin resistance here. We're starting to have a problem. And here, you can see the blood sugar has now come up off the floor. Insulin's a bit higher again, and the blood sugar is rising to 8.3. And then what happens in the more advanced stage? Blood sugar 11.4. This is when you would be diagnosed with diabetes on a standard blood test, by the way. And the insulin level has dropped. The pancreas is starting to fail. Mm-hmm. Now, it's all well and good to say, okay, you're a doctor, you can test for insulin resistance in your laboratory. But a lot of people are curious to know if they have insulin resistance and whether they can check themselves. And you'll be interested to know that you can see a lot of signs of insulin resistance by looking at the skin. And I've got several patients here today, and you know that I'll inspect your skin. These are what's called skin tags. The most common cause of skin tags is insulin resistance. If you have skin tags, you are almost certainly insulin resistant. And a lot of patients tell me, oh, I go to my GP and ask them what causes it. They say, in one sentence, I don't know, but would you like me to burn them off? They're a warning sign. They're usually in the armpits, around the neck, in the groin region. This sign here is called acanthosis nigricans. It's pigmentation of the skin. We often see it around the neck, in the armpits, in the groin, or more interestingly, on the back of the fingers, the skin creases here. And there's good research that shows that even before you start gaining an excess amount of weight, you can see the changes on the back of the fingers before anything else. So I can see a few people having a look at their fingers now. I see a lot of patients who come in with problems with their skin complexion. And what we find is that when we improve the insulin resistance, that significantly improves. Have a ketogenic diet, lower your insulin levels, skin gets better. It's very nice. And that's one of the reasons why acne is very common in the state of adolescence, because the state of adolescence, puberty, is associated with insulin resistance. Now for the good news. It had to be coming. We can actually reverse this. If you go on a low carbohydrate diet and reduce your chronic elevated levels of insulin, your insulin sensitivity will improve. Have a look at the insulin levels of this patient here, and 3 months later, big drops. Here's another example. You can see the 1 hour insulin here was 114, coming down to 71, just in the space of a few months. And there's also a nice associated weight loss to boot. So I think it's pretty clear a low carbohydrate diet is the best diet for weight loss. But some of you are probably still concerned. You're probably thinking, well, it's all well and good to be skinny, but what happens if it's going to kill me? All that saturated fat, right? So let's have a look at the biggest study that's been done to date on this topic. It was published last year, and it had over 135,000 participants. They were followed for more than 7 years across 18 countries. This was a big, big study. So what we can see is that the group that was having the least amount of fat had a mortality rate per 1,000 person years of just under 7. Let's see what happens to the group that was getting more of the energy from fat, more than 3 times as much from fat. Their mortality rate dropped about 4. More fat, live longer. And if we have a look at a graph from that same study demonstrating this, where your risk of dying is on the axis going up, the higher the worse it is, and the amount of fat you're having is going to the right-hand side. And you can see there's no point at which having more fat becomes problematic. In actual fact, it seems the more fat you have, the total mortality continues to drop. So now let's flip this on its head and have a look at carbohydrate intake. If you have 46.4 of your energy from carbohydrate, the mortality per 1,000 person years risk was about 4. And by the way, this is not considered a particularly low carbohydrate diet, but it's low carbohydrate compared to the average diet. Let's have a look at the group of the population that was getting far more, 72.2% of their energy from carbohydrate. Their risk of dying went from about 4 to over 7 with more carbohydrates. And again, we have a look at this graph. The more carbohydrates you have, your mortality just keeps on climbing. So low carbohydrate, high fat diets, you will live longer. Now, this is not a one-size-fits-all diet. Some people might be able to have 80 grams of carbohydrates a day. Rod said his limit was 50. Some other people might only be able to have 20 grams of carbohydrates a day to be in optimal health. And we use something called the ketone meter to determine your optimal level of carbohydrate restriction. Now, the only difference between a low carbohydrate diet and a ketogenic diet is the degree of restriction of carbohydrates. If you reduce your carbohydrates enough to lower your insulin levels to permit fat burning, some of that fat, when it's metabolized, will be converted to a chemical called a ketone. Now, the thing to realize is that in the human body, the only source of ketones comes from fat metabolism, nothing else. So if you have ketones in your bloodstream, that indicates that your body is burning fat. So we can take a drop of your blood, put it on a meter, and within 10 seconds, we've got the answer. Now, down the bottom, this is the scale that we generally use. And it's also useful, as well as indicating your degree of fat metabolism, for suppressing your appetite. What we find in the clinic is over the last few years is that people who come in with ketones hovering around 0.4 or higher, they often say, you know what, I've only eat twice a day now, I'm just not hungry. And this is demonstrated in the research. We know when you have higher levels of ketones, it has an appetite suppressant effect. So not only are you burning more fat, but the whole calories in, calories out, first law of thermodynamics equation, you put less energy into the system. So this actually dovetails in quite nicely with the conventional wisdom of calories in, calories out. But it adds another layer. It starts to explain how you can put less calories in. So this is an example here of a food diary with ketones being recorded down the right-hand side, the numbers down the side. And the reason we do this is because by recording your ketones and comparing it to your food, you can actually start to understand which foods are stopping you burning fat. Let's zoom in a little bit. So we can see down the right here, we've got a few ketone numbers. 1.1, that's good. 0.7, that's okay. 0.4, that's still okay. And then we drop to 0.2. Why? A small piece of sponge cake. Okay. Probably not the best. But it's okay because the next day they're back up to 0.7. Piece of toast, bumps it down to 0.2. This person is very, very sensitive to carbohydrates. And without doing this, they would never have known. So now I'd like to take a closer look at sugar and the uniquely toxic effects that that has. So we've already seen about this glucose molecule on the left, the one in the yellow. But the one on the right is called fructose. And when you join one of each of these molecules together, it forms table sugar, or sucrose. And you can see that sucrose is exactly 50% fructose. And that's important because a lot of people say we don't have a problem in Australia because we don't have high fructose corn syrup. Well, high fructose corn syrup is only between 42% and 55% fructose. So they're very, very comparable. The table sugar we have here in Australia is every bit as bad as high fructose corn syrup. Now, when we have a look at the sweetness of different sugars, the reason fructose is a problem is it's more than twice as sweet as glucose. And this is a problem because as humans, we love self-gratification. We've got this pathway in the brain called the mesolimbic pathway. And this is the reinforcing pathway. It reinforces our behaviour. And when we stimulate our brain with something sweet, we get a release of a chemical called dopamine, and it says, yes, do that again. And fructose activates this pathway by virtue of it being more than double the sweetness of glucose. It activates its pathway more strongly. And when we scan the brains of obese individuals and having a look at dopamine receptors, we can see there's a reduced number of dopamine receptors in the brains of obese people. So this means to get the same level of satisfaction from a meal, obese people need to eat more. And this is where sweetness feeds into it. Over time, these changes will downregulate. But the problem is that until they downregulate over time, you have to restrict the sweet foods in your diet. Now, fructose has another particularly toxic effect, and that leads to insulin resistance. Fructose, far more powerfully than glucose, leads to a fatty liver. So when you eat fructose, normally about 80% of it gets taken up by the muscle, gets taken up by the liver. And then it goes to the liver, and there's a capacity for storage in the liver for glucose as something called glycogen. So that saps up a little bit more. So the amount of energy that ends up going to the liver and going to the mitochondria within the liver is only a fraction of what you ingest. But with fructose, it doesn't go to the other tissues, and it doesn't have this reservoir where it can be taken up or stored. So every gram of fructose you eat gets delivered to the mitochondria in the liver. And when those mitochondria get overloaded, they produce fatty liver, a process called de novo lipogenesis. This is a slide. Those white globules there are globules of fat in a fatty liver, and excess fructose can do that. And this is strongly associated with insulin resistance. Another problem is that sugar can attach to protein, and you've got sugar bathing the cells of your body. And that sugar, over time, can not only attach to it, but can form these complexes called advanced glycated end products. And they can affect nearly every type of cell and molecule in the body. The problem is that fructose does this 7 times more than glucose. Yet another problem with fructose. And when we have a look at the consequences of these advanced glycosylated end products, they affect a lot of the tissues that we see people with diabetes have. Nerve problems. We've already talked about how the pancreas can start to fail and reduces its capacity to secrete insulin. Kidney problems, blood vessel problems. You can go blind. Arthritis is really, really common. Now, just to illustrate the point that these advanced glycosylated end products are associated with aging, this is some ground up rib cartilage. On the top left, this is from 2 weeks old, and on the bottom right from 88. And this is what normally happens across the lifespan. It's very similar to a process called the Maillard reaction or the Browning reaction, caramelization, if you will. Not quite the same, but along the same lines. And over time, the sugar in our circulation will change our tissues. And I'd have a question. Why would you want to accelerate the aging process by increasing your sugar levels even more? Now, we know that the most common sources of added sugar in our diet are sweets. Maybe some people will be surprised to know that cereals is one of the major causes of added sugars in our diets. But sugars are also hidden in a lot of foods. Not many people realise that a squirt of tomato sauce, probably far less than what they actually habitually put on, has got 1.5 teaspoons of sugar in it. But the real surprise is down on the bottom right here. This is a medium-sized mango juice. 12.5 teaspoons of sugar. And there's other ways that sugar can be hidden. We've got an organic almond milk here. Perfect. You can see lactose-free, soy-free, gluten-free, no cane sugar. Okay, you're feeling pretty good right now. Let's have a look at the ingredients. Still look okay? Show of hands who thinks it doesn't look too bad. Organic agave syrup. You know, agave syrup is 75% fructose. It's even worse than table sugar. It's worse than cane sugar. And this here
The lady's laugh is funny.
is a list. The names that sugar is disguised in Australian nutrition labels. Food manufacturers are allowed to use every one of these euphemisms for sugar on their label. Makes it very difficult. Now, some people say, but fructose, it's natural, right? Maybe it's natural, but we don't consume it in a natural way.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know it, but this is a fruit tree on the left. It has no fruit. It's because fruit is seasonal. We don't have access to fruit year-round. And if you want honey, well, you don't get to go to Coles. Traditionally, you had to go and ask the bee if he would mind if you had his honey. So we consume fruit in a very different way. We now have 500 mils of orange juice, which contains 6 oranges, and it's had all the fibre taken out.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's why we don't
just
drink
as an
juice.
aside, don't drink your fruit. Just do not drink your fruit. Now, I'd just like to touch on one more point before I finish, and that's artificial sweeteners. So we've
Don't
already
do
talked
it.
about the mesolimbic pathway reinforcing eating behaviours, and artificial sweeteners do exactly the same thing. When we have a look at the evidence, all the cohort studies, they show that consumption of artificial sweeteners is associated with weight gain, increased waist circumference, metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, and heart attacks. Artificial sweeteners don't get a leave pass. So I'd like to leave everybody here with 3 key points. Number 1, you are not to blame for being overweight if you've been following bad advice. Critical. Number 2, low carbohydrate diets are the best diet for weight loss because they lower insulin. And finally, people live longer on low carbohydrate diets. Thank you.
All right. So,
Alright.
what are your thoughts?
I think that he has good information, and I'm not against a low carb diet. I am kind of against long term keto, like ultra low, because I don't think being in ketogenesis all the time is healthy for your body either. But I think that if we eat meats and vegetables, that's what we're kind of like meant to eat. But also you need like a variety of vegetables. You can't just pick one vegetable and be like, that's my vegetable, because it's not going to give you all the nutrients you need.
Okay. So I think it's I think it's true based on my experience, and I would like you want to do this.
I don't mind doing a low carbohydrate,
Yeah.
but I'm not going to sign up for not having carbs.
Yes, and I think I think there's a phase, like let's say like for me, like 150 is my max. I would want to go. If I go 150 over, I'm like, oh, then I would probably go almost keto-ish just to drop it rapidly down to like where I want to, like 140, 135, whatever I want to do. Once I'm happy, I'm like, okay, cool. Then carbs come back a little bit. And so, but it's always the lifestyle is low carb. And then weekends we're like, okay, sure, I'll have a burrito or a cake or whatever, occasionally, whatever, kind of thing. So I kind of do that kind of thing. So whatever your goal is, and whatever you think you want to drop to, then go keto until you hit that, and then maintain with low carbs. Yeah.
Fine.
And so I also think that,
but that also requires you to be on board with encouraging our children to try new things,
which is
more than broccoli
or more different kinds of veggies.
Yeah, like we should be eating sweet potatoes and squashes of various types. We should be eating different dark leafy green vegetables like spinach and kale and chard and maybe mustard greens or other collard greens. Like you need to mix it up and have variety, not only just for your nutrient profile, but for our children's sake, so that they have a wider palette.
Yes. So I think that it'll be a learning curve-ish for me. Like I'm just limited to kale.
You eat broccoli,
kale.
You don't even
spinach.
eat kale though. You don't eat these. You drink them.
Okay, well I can eat them.
But you don't.
Okay. Well, we'll eat them from now on.
Okay, and how about some beans every once in a while?
Okay, beans, as long as they're not beans aren't carbs, right?
They have carbs in them. They're starchy, yeah.
No.
It's called a portion. Have a portion.
But the thing is, like, I don't enjoy beans, and if they're just carbs, and no.
It's not just carbs.
Like, I will save my carbs for like special days. Like,
Danish day.
Danish Day or Cheesecake Day or Banhoi Day or Sushi Day.
This is my point, though. I want my kids to learn how to eat healthy carbs, like
I don't
whole
think
fruits and vegetables, and not all the processed, heavily sugar added stuff.
when you say healthy carbs, I don't feel like there's such a thing as healthy carbs. But we just say low carb because we want to or something. That's just nothing. Okay, so I think we don't have a problem eating low healthy carbs. That's just we could just go home, eat whatever, and like okay, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, here's the one I want to show you quick. I won't watch the whole video, but you see Sharon. Was it? She's actually on the
I want to
Atkins,
just get right out there because
but she's like 70,
all the way down the.
and she looks like she's not 70 years old.
She also has money and has taken plastic surgery.
Oh, yeah, she does. She did talk about plastic surgery, yes. But she's taking it out and all the other stuff. Okay, but yeah. Okay. So I think there's anyways, I also want to ask you about the beach trip. Like, what happened there? Are we still doing it? Because I think after she said that even though she's on Atkins,
you still have to work out.
You still gotta work out.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, yeah, I still gotta go run, even though we lots of really
yeah,
bad.
You still need to use your respiratory and your circulatory system.
So I was like, yeah, I need to do that too. So
yeah.
So what happened to the beach trips?
Well, I got back on, and then I ended up having to go out to Millsap with my mom, and that kind of threw me off my schedule. And then I had a bout of fatigue for a while, and so then I was like, okay, well, maybe not quite yet. And now this last week, I've been like, okay, I think I can get back into the workout routine because my body's got enough energy lately to do it.
No, are you still doing their diet plan or something? Or are you gonna switch to this low carb?
I would like to kind of. I think it is important to do like the 6 small meals a day. And their stuff is fairly low carb. Yeah. But I know that you're not really down for specialty recipe purchases at the store. So, yeah, I've just kind of been modifying. Okay. And I am trying to listen to my body. Like, if I'm hungry, I will eat. If I'm not hungry, I don't need to eat.
So, based on what I've learned, I'm going to say I'm okay with butter. Let's try it. Okay. But I still want to not, all the cookies and baking and all that stuff, right?
Right. I'm not interested in feeding my kids a bunch of processed sugar either. I'm not trying to poison my children.
And please don't give the kids frosting, raw batter, and cookie batter while you're cooking stuff. Because I thought that you're going to be cooking for other people, and then I don't want my kids to be eating that because that's for other people to get poisoned by.
Okay. Well.
Because they got asked or what?
No, it's just part of tradition, I guess. Part of
the fun of.
Yeah, it's the fun of just have a little taste, and especially because they're not going to get to eat those things that I made for a baby shower. It's not for us to enjoy.
Yeah, I just.
So it's just giving them a little taste, and so that they don't feel left out.
I feel this is my perception of it. It's like if I see this as like a drug, it's like, oh, here, have some marijuana, because whatever. Don't worry, and it's an addictive thing. You're gonna want more, and it's just like we don't give our kids drugs just so here you go try, just so that you can have balance, and so that one day you grow up, you won't have this restriction and not go all crazy on marijuana and heroin. So here's a little bit now, right? And that's kind of how I see. Like you're like, hey, give me sugar because I'm going to go all out and give sugar and have control. And I'm just like, hey, but it's a drug and it's addictive. And if you just put them on that path, they're just going to go that way.
I would say, Ian, how often do I make frosting?
I just don't want to.
I could understand if I was like a professional baker and I'm making this kind of stuff every single day and they're getting it every single day.
Mm.
Of course, yeah, no, they don't need to be tasting the frosting every single day because that adds up.
No, because they already got cocoa, and now they got the honey going on their stuff, and it's like all this little stuff creeps in from just other things. And so I just want to cut it out, and then like we said special days, which is birthdays, holidays. Fine. Okay. And I want to stick to that, not just like, I'm baking for someone else. Here you go. Well, a little special holiday. We agree to that.
Okay, I'm gonna ask that you change your body language and your tone of voice.
Okay.
Because you're starting to make me feel angry and disrespected.
Okay, sorry. So, how do I change this? So, please, I like to stick to our old special holidays, not because we bake something for somebody. Okay.
Of course, we can do it.
Because I'm saying this from a caring dad and husband, and I know we talked. This is sensitive when we first got married, and I'm just like, okay.
It's a very sensitive issue on both sides.
And I've tagged along, and I've had phases where like, okay, let's just cheesecake this and ice cream this, and I'm just like, and I'm like, I love you.
Oh, so terrible, yes. It's so hard and difficult for you to have that cheesecake.
And I'm like, I should not be doing this, but okay, be loving. And then now I'm just like, I'm 40 now. Can't be doing this because I'm going to have issues developing, and I care for my kids too, and their pancreas and insulin levels.
I think our kids are fine.
Well, I still don't want to. And once they're 18, they can decide on their own. But hopefully, I train them so that their palatable thingy is like they don't crave the sugar like an addictive heroin or marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
Because I see that's a drug.
Okay, so does this mean that you're not going to be doing any of your Asian dipping sauces?
Yeah, I stopped doing my Asian dipping sauces. And so I actually stopped eating barley now. I'm just like, meat. Yeah, just meat. And actually, I've been eating less because I'm like one rib and whatever. I'm like, good. And some broccoli. Yeah.
I will have you know that I'm also eating less, but it's not because I cut out all of my carbs. Because I haven't cut out all my carbs.
Right.
It's just a decision.
Okay, well, I actually, whatever.
I'm not suffering.
Okay. I'm just saying that there's benefits to that for low carb.
There's also bigger benefits, I would argue, for having variety in your diet.
For low carb.
For food.
For food, okay.
For vegetables.
Okay, good.
We need to have a serious conversation.
Yeah.
More importantly than having low carb is the variety of vegetables in our family's diet.
Yeah, fine. I agree with you.
Okay, but then if I'm going to stop giving my children a couple teaspoons of frosting every time I make something for someone, which is like, 6 times a year? I need from you more support at the dinner table.
With veggies?
Yeah. None of our kids eat onions. It's not because they don't like them. It's because of your huge reaction to them. Okay?
Okay, well, I can do
None of our kids are interested in trying anything green.
I can do
other than broccoli.
I feel the gagging coming up. We're thinking about it.
I'm not asking you to eat onions, Ian, but like squash.
Yeah.
You can handle. You're a big boy. Like zucchini, spaghetti squash, acorn squash,
spaghetti
pumpkin.
Squash. Can I just get it raw? I don't like it when it's.
This is the problem. No, it's a problem because you're all about cut out the carbs. But then you're not interested in any of the other plethora of health and nutrition.
Okay, well,
Okay?
Give me
You
a
literally
raw.
want us to eat fish and broccoli.
So
That's not healthy.
no, I'm saying add your stuff.
You need to add it too.
Add your stuff.
Because our kids watch you and they see your reactions and they see what you eat and
Yeah.
it makes a huge impact on them.
Okay, add your stuff, but I add it raw. I don't like it cooked.
You're not going to eat a salad. Raw equals salad.
Yeah, I'll eat it.
Okay.
Well, can I just have my squash in the squash pile?
You're going to eat raw squash.
Yeah, or
You're going to get a real big bellyache.
or tomato in a tomato pile, and then whatever pile, and I just eat it as is.
There are vegetables that you have to cook to be able to eat.
So, squash.
Yeah.
Can we just do spaghetti squash?
Not raw.
Okay, we can do spaghetti squash. I haven't graduated to the other squash yet. And then other than that, there's just kind of zucchini. Do I can use zucchini raw?
Yeah, you can use zucchini raw.
I just think about zucchinis.
Am I going to be earning these organically? So you're cool with eating the pesticides?
Which is why it's like, which is why I don't get that. It's like, well, we can't. We can it is more expensive, but then at the same time, it's like, do I really believe they're organic? And there's organic scammers too, and they say it's organic, but it's really not organic. And then
So then you're going to help me with a vegetable garden? Because you haven't been real interested in that.
we can try, but I don't think we figured it out yet.
No, we haven't. And you have to keep trying. And you need to plant a whole bunch more stuff.
Okay. So
you need to do companion planting. You got to get some flowers in there that help bring the pollinators but repel the pests. So you need to be on board for this to flourish, because I don't have the mental capacity, I don't have the physical energy to deal with that whole massive gardening project on top of homeschooling and keeping this house clean and organized and doing all the other stuff that I do through church and helping other people. It's too much and I can't handle it.
I'm just saying, let's just kind of ease it into it. Okay, so we can add another veggie. I would suggest kale.
Could you be a little more excited about helping me get the ground ready?
Yeah, sure.
Great. I'd appreciate it. I don't appreciate being the only adult out there with a shovel.
Oh, okay. Well, I was working on the story.
There's always something else.
So,
I have something else I could be working on too, by the way.
Okay.
I have a lot of list of things that I do, and I have to prioritize them, and I have to put time management. And usually I'm able to get most of my stuff done, but sometimes there's a little bit of a time crunch. Like today, I'm sitting here doing clock talk with you when I have a project that I need to finish for tomorrow.
What? Can I help you with your project?
I would love for you to help me with that project. That would be great.
Yeah, I'll stay up with you.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Okay. So, when do we start this low carb eating?
We already did, pretty much. I mean, what's in our refrigerator right now? Like nothing.
Well, we still have rice.
We have meat.
We have rice.
You went to the store last, so we have meat.
So we have meat, there's broccoli, and veggies, and string beans. Mixed veggies. So what the thing is interesting is that with this low carb thing, it doesn't take much of a meal now. It's just like one meat thingy.
Have you noticed our children are like complaining that they're hungry?
Well, that's because of the carbs.
Do you know that they're growing and that they need more carbs than you do?
No.
They need more energy. Yes. They don't have a big fat storage that they need to drop down.
No.
Okay, they're not 40 years old and their metabolism isn't like flatlining. Okay, they are little, they are growing, they need more food than we do.
Okay, we're fine. Okay.
I am not putting my children on a low carb diet.
Okay, so they can have the rice. Just
They can have rice and they can have healthy bread.
Okay.
And they can have fruit and they can have vegetables. And they can have meat and fish and chicken.
Okay.
They can have it all except for high processed, sugary, artificial food.
Okay.
My kids are going to be able to have whole fruits, whole vegetables, whole grains. And I think that you need to recognize that that's okay. Because you know what? If we give them healthy choices, they can choose and pick. And then you know what? If we're not giving them a plate and saying, eat everything on the plate, they'll just eat until they're full. And then naturally, life and human body is made in this really awesome, amazing way that God created us to self-regulate. If you're not putting a portion on your kid's plate and saying, you have to eat all of that, they'll stop when they're full. And if you only give them healthy options on the table, you don't have to worry about what they're eating or not eating.
I usually think that they say that they're hungry or they're full because they don't like eating something.
Sometimes they will say that they're full because they're not that interested in what's on the table.
Right. And then
that is true.
They're hungry after the meal is done.
Correct. And then you just give them another healthy option.
And then, yeah.
So you know what? You didn't like dinner. That's okay. You don't have to eat it all. But if you're hungry later, you get a carrot. You don't get a cookie.
Okay. Got it.
Evan and Penelope will eat raw spinach. They just munch on it. They like it.
That's good.
So, I mean, our kids aren't... Again, we don't have a whole bunch of processed stuff in our house. Like, our kids are fine. They're doing
Okay, yeah,
well.
they're fine. It's just us. Like, we're not going to eat breads.
I will still eat healthy bread.
As a low carb?
Yes. On an occasion. I'll do like an Ezekiel bread or a Dave's Killer bread. I'm not going to go buy HEB spongy white bread. That's all nothing good for you.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I'm not going to deny my body a whole food group. It's not going to happen.
A whole food group of
grains.
Okay.
I'm not doing that.
Okay.
I will eat less. I'm not going to stop eating them.
Yeah. I'm just gonna do my thing until I get to about 140.
And you're welcome to do that.
And so whatever, if you decide to do that for a period of time, if you want to reach a certain goal or.
My goal is to get stronger before I even think about losing any weight. I just want to get muscle.
So what's this like? What's that mean? You want to get muscle so you can lift something or?
Yes. Okay. So I got the soft wave treatment. I'm able to actually do some load bearing things. I was broken for a long time. Now I'm mostly healed, so I want to take advantage of that and get back my muscle mass.
Okay.
I couldn't even wear a necklace for years. Okay.
So how do you like know when you're there?
What do you mean by there?
Like you get the muscle that you want. Like you can lift some amount of weight.
My posture muscles will be more easily used. I notice, if you have your pelvic floor and your lower abdomen muscles stronger, I've been noticing more clean elimination and regular elimination. And I think my back posture muscles, okay, like I only slouch now when I'm really tired versus all the time. I don't have to constantly be thinking, okay, sit up, sit up, sit up, tighten your stomach, sit up. Like it just kind of naturally happens now versus before I had to really concentrate on just straighten your back, like chin up a bit, like posture muscles and things like that. And you know, when I can do a full body push up, I will be very happy. And I don't have to do it on like an incline versus like, yeah.
All right. Sounds good. I will know. Do it. All right. Well, I think that's it for our Quack Talk. It's about 55 minutes. Thanks for watching. This is our sensitive issue
Be careful.
talk. Oh.
Sorry if I came across disrespectful. I felt a little attacked.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't feel like
And protective.
I didn't try to attack you.
I feel very protective of my children.
Sorry. Forgive me. All right, bye.